minutes, okay, everybody. Come on. Let's mess everything up to start over. Ready? I can't remember who it was. So let me test this. You counted that about 5 minutes ago? Mechanic said it. I'm like, oh crap. Just practicing. Anybody got a shot of liquor? That guy, I can get along with a lot. Y'all won't make fun of me, all right? I'm gonna do the best I can with what I got. You don't have to hurl them.
Please, come on.
That's good. That's good.
I'm ready. All right, we're going to call this meeting to order, June 24th. We'll start off with thank you for all the citizens that have showed up and whoever's on YouTube. I'm the Mayor Pro Tem tonight, and our Mayor Jordan Marlowe is at a teachers conference in Georgia, and it's also his anniversary, him and his wife. So, all right, let's start off with the agenda. Approval of the agenda. We have a change. Item 9C is going to be removed for tonight. Okay. Yeah. Anybody have any questions on that, or?
Motion to approve the agenda?
Second.
All right. I wanted to say that. No place to say anything. Okay. All right. All right. So all in favor of the agenda, signify. Oh, and the amended part. Signify by saying aye.
Aye.
5-0. Aye. I forgot I placed the vote too here. All right. Next. Let's, the invocation will be by citizen Tim Martin. So if everybody would stand.
Everybody remain standing. We'll do the pledge right after this. Let us pray. Father, Luke 5 tells us Jesus told Peter to cast his nets into deep water. Tonight, let us cast our nets as well. We ask you for the blessings over this body, the city, the county, our country, and state at large. Maybe we be representatives worthy of the sacrifice of your Son, Jesus. We have vacation Bible schools going on throughout our city this month. And let those who have not come to know you recognize the blessings that you have. Second Chronicles even tells us, if we turn from our wicked ways, you will heal our land. We understand this is a battle of good and evil, but you're on our side. We certainly appreciate all the blessings that you have for us. We certainly appreciate the sacrifice of your Son. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I hope y'all don't have a deep net to pull me into deep seas after tonight, the way this is. Okay, first presentation is the CARES recipient, William McGehee, and I guess Mike Newton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, we do have a celebrity in our midst. Many of you know Mr. William McGehee. He was recognized by the Florida Farm Bureau, or Florida Farm Bureau Federation, through the County Alliance for Responsible and Environmental Stewardship program, known as CARES, which honors farmers and ranchers with public recognition through consumer outreach and education to teach Floridians how farmers and ranchers protect the environment every day. So Mr. McGehee of McGehee and Sons Farm in Alachua County was honored for environmental stewardship at the UF IFAS North Florida Research and Education Center, Swanee Valley, at their 19th annual Swanee CARES celebration. I believe Commissioner Norfleet attended that. I attended, as well as the mayor. There were several ranchers in the region, the Swanee Valley region, that were recognized for CARES. Mr. McGehee has introduced what are known in the industry as best management practices, or BMPs, for crop rotation that he uses at his farm operation. He has over 1,000 acres of farming operations, and they rotate their crops periodically to ensure that it's, I guess it's a health of a crop thing, and I think some more of the ag guys in the room could know much more about it than me. But Mr. McGehee was recognized for all of his efforts to preserve the environment, and we think that the citizens of Newberry should be aware of his recognition and should make much ado about it. It's a pretty big deal. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. Mr. McGehee could not be with us tonight, but we did reach out and speak with him about it, and he expresses his appreciation that we took the time to bring this forward to the commission and to the community.
All right. Item B is Recreation Department Annual Overview, and that will be by Mr. Travis. Mr. Travis.
Good evening, Mayor, Commissioners. I am here to present the recreation overview, kind of go over the things that we've done over the course of the year and some things we have to look forward to.
Aim. Okay.
Is this where the mayor's supposed to? Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
Monty helped. Okay, so here is a description of our organizational chart. Nothing has changed since the last time you've seen this. We have the same number of programmers, coordinators, supervisor, myself, staff assistant. No. Our youth offerings, we offer most of the sports that you can imagine that youth would play in: baseball, softball, all the bat sports, basketball, soccer, volleyball. We operate in the spring, summer, fall, and the winter. Our leagues for Babe Ruth, for baseball is Babe Ruth, and softball. Our softball teams actually went to, they finalized state today. Our 12U won, finished second, 10U finished second in the state, and 8U finished third. So really nice showing there today. We play in the Boys and Girls Club for 14U football, and the Tri-County Football League. This will be our first season in it, coming up for 12U and below. And then we have Act 4. We run soccer through Act 4. We run basketball through Act 4 and volleyball. And Newberry is a big part of Act 4. I'm currently the president, Dallas treasurer, and Brittany's the secretary. So we actually handle a lot for the surrounding areas: Gainesville, Alachua, Bronson, Williston. Everybody participates in that league. So it's pretty busy.
You're going to bring in lacrosse, and if you got an extra place there, you can put lacrosse.
We've talked about that, yeah, on the bottom left. We talked about that as a league. I think Act 4 is something that they could, we'd start small, maybe, some younger age groups. I mean, right now it's just field space. I mean, we're jam-packed, so.
It's coming, man.
Participation numbers by season, you'll see fall and spring are by far our busiest season. Winter, the only thing we really do, the only youth sport we offer is basketball, and is that lacrosse. Boost that up. Summer is adult programs. We offer some camps, those kind of things. These are our numbers across the board for each sport, with soccer being our biggest number, followed by basketball, tackle football, and softball. Softball was great. We had, I think, maybe 10 kids sign up last season, and this season we had 82. So I wanted to break these down by each sport, but I thought once I put them on here, it kind of shows a really good trend, actually, upward for everything, for the most part, that we're doing. The only one going the wrong direction is baseball. And I think that's just across the board. Talked to a lot of places, and with the amount of travel ball associations that we have locally, we got pro ball here, elite, gator ball. It's all kind of, a lot of kids are going in that direction. But everything else, you see the biggest gain was softball. But there's a slow and steady increase in everything else that we've been offering. And that's our Raider Bowl trophy for football last season. We went to Santa Fe and won that. Adult programming, we offered over this past season slow pitch softball. Cornhole was a big deal. We had the Gators softball coach out there. He was in our league, which was Tim Walton. Pretty cool. We offer adult basketball. We try to get that going. I mean, it's a tough one to work around Westside, but we offer an open gym. And we've been talking to M2 Battle Sports out there at our complex about possibly doing a laser tag league, seeing what kind of interest we can get in that.
Travis, do you recall who the reigning champion is for adult cornhole?
It wasn't you or I.
Oh, I thought it was me, maybe.
Okay, let's go.
Maybe that's the
Is
season
that
before.
cornhole?
Yeah.
He never won.
Hey, it's only us.
He never won. Love him, but he never won.
It's only SPN now. It's getting big.
It is getting big. We have a lot of participation there. We got people asking over and over, when are you bringing it back? I mean, we just have to squeeze it in when we don't have practice. And
I'm going to check the video. I'm pretty sure we won.
I got it. Standing. Martin Luther King Jr. Community Center. We have a lot of nice events over the past year. The best one, as far as attendance, was the Martin Luther King Jr. celebration. I think it went really well. Got a lot of positive feedback. We also had an Easter celebration, and some of the classes that we offer, art class, book club, cooking class. They do a kids book giveaway. So if anybody ever has interest, we're really trying to push those kind of weekly events out there, cooking class, those kind of things. Senior programming, we offer bingo at the municipal building. We offer senior gaming at MLK Center, walk aerobics, elder care. We tried silver sneakers this past I guess, spring. Turnout wasn't that great, but we're trying to push it, trying to offer new things, see if we can get some feedback from folks, or see if we can just get some sign-ups. So we're going to keep trying new things and see what we can get. Some special events that we did, we either took a part in, supported in some way. West Fest Music Festival, I mean, big deal. Easton Fall Festival. We did baseball, softball opening ceremonies that I guess a lot of folks won't know if you're not in the program, but we did at Champions this year. We did a Friday night ceremony where we had our teams come out. We did a home run derby, speed challenge, all kinds of things to kind of just, kick the season off. And the biggest deal was we had Chevelle Shepherd. She was the winner of The Voice. Thanks to Amy, she came out and she sang the national anthem. I mean, she did the Indianapolis 500 too this year, so that was pretty cool. And we hosted the GSC annual meeting there at Easton. Some projects, as most of you know, we finished the Martin Luther King Jr. project with the restroom, playground, picnic area. We did some new fencing. We did the municipal building foundation repair, Canterbury obviously. We're working right now on the Jimmy Durden Park enhancements to get those beach volleyball courts in. We're going to do some fencing and some field adjustments there and some renovations. We're also working on the East Newbury Sports Complex, the multi-purpose fields. We're working on the design right now to get those underway because, like I said, we need some field space. And then community garden, we're also working on that now too. Questions?
Okay, any questions from the commission? Staff? Thanks again, man. I appreciate it, Travis. You're doing a great job,
Thank you.
man. You really are.
I'll just make a
Oh,
comment.
what we got?
I think you've done a great job, and things are going really well, and I hope they continue to do so. Seems like you got it together for us, so
Thank you, Mike.
appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
And Mr. Mayor, the month of July is Parks and Recreation Month, and we have an accompanying proclamation to go along with this presentation.
Oh, that's right, we do.
Mr. Mayor, sometimes the mayor likes me to read it, sometimes he likes to read it.
I want you to
However
read
wanna do
it. That's
It'd
you.
be up to you.
Your name's right here.
This is a proclamation of the City of Newbury recognizing the month of July as Parks and Recreation Month. Whereas since 1985, Americans have celebrated Park and Recreation Month in July to promote the importance of parks and recreation in health and wellness, conservation and social equity, and to recognize the thousands of park and recreation employees that maintain our nation's local, state, and community parks. Whereas our parks and recreation are vital for our communities, from protecting open space and natural resources, and helping to fight obesity and providing activities and resources for all walks of life. And whereas parks and recreation programs build healthy, active communities that aid in the prevention of chronic disease, provide therapeutic recreation services for those who are mentally or physically disabled, and also provide the mental and emotional health of all citizens. Whereas parks and recreation programs increase a community's economic prosperity through increased property values, expansion of local tax base, increased tourism, the attraction and retention of businesses, and crime prevention. Whereas parks and recreation areas offer improved water quality, protect groundwater, prevent flooding, improve the quality of air that we breathe, provide vegetative buffers to development, and produce habitat for wildlife. And whereas our parks and recreation are natural areas that ensure the ecological beauty of our community and provide a place for children and adults to connect with nature and recreate outdoors. Now, therefore, Jordan Marlowe, as mayor of the City of Newbury, hereby proclaims that July is recognized as Park and Recreation Month in the City of Newbury, this 24th day of June 2019. Judy S. Rice, signature for our city clerk, signature for our mayor, Jordan Marlowe. Appropriate motion is to pass the proclamation as read by its entirety.
Motion to accept proclamation as read.
Second. So we got a motion by Commissioner Wilson and a second by Commissioner Farnsworth. compliance presentation by Mr. Travis Lee.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, City Commissioners. I'm here to talk to you tonight about a fascinating subject of the Americans with Disability Act. Typically, when we discuss the ADA, we're talking about buildings and sidewalks and restrooms and physical things. Tonight, we're going to be talking about how the ADA affects us in terms of our social media, our website, our web presence. There's been a lot of activity in the municipal realm regarding ADA compliance on websites and web presences. So that's what we're going to talk about tonight. Scott and Andrea are both prepared to yank me off the stage if I say anything I shouldn't say. So moving along. What is the ADA? So the ADA is the Americans with Disability Act. It was put into place many, many years ago, and it basically mandates that nobody should be held to a different standard or unable to access anything because of a disability they might have. Specifically, it says that as a public entity, we cannot deny a qualified individual with a disability the opportunity to participate in or benefit from the aid, benefit, or services we offer, and that we cannot limit an individual with a disability from the enjoyment of any right, privilege, advantage, or opportunity enjoyed by others that can receive that aid, benefit, or service. So this particularly applies to websites and other media. There's been a lot of issues about this going on. In fact, recently, Congress, including our own Representative Ted Yoho, sent a letter to the Department of Justice asking for clarification on the ADA. And in their letter, they state that businesses of every shape and size throughout the country are being threatened with legal action by private plaintiffs for unsubstantiated violations of the ADA. This problem is expanding at a rapid rate since the internet allows for such actions to be filed from anywhere, and there are no restrictions or limitations on making such complaints. The absence of statutory, regulatory, or other controlling language on this issue only fuels the proliferation of these suits, since there are no requirements these complainants must have. In fact, in most cases, these suits are filed for the purpose of reaching a financial settlement and do little or nothing to improve website accessibility. So that was sent by the Congress of the United States on June 20th of last year. And several months ago, the DOJ came back and said, yeah, we're sorry, we're not going to do anything about it. So it's kind of where we are from a legal standpoint, is that there is laws that require us to be accessible and be available to everybody, but there's no clear definitions of what that actually means. So it's in the eyes of the beholder. So speaking of ADA web litigation, as you can see from this chart, the litigation on ADA issues is dramatically increasing. In 2013, there was less than 3,000 cases, and last year in 2018, there was more than 10,000. Good for us. Florida is not the #1 state for cases. We are the second highest number of cases filed in the nation. And as you can see, it's increasing more and more. The state of Florida right now, I know, is cities all over the state are making sure they're compliant, making sure they have everything in place so they're not part of next year's 10,000 cases. So what does it mean to be compliant? There are 4 principles of accessibility. Those principles are that the information must be perceivable, meaning that it can't be invisible to any of our users. They must be able to get that information either through sight or sound or touch. All of our web presence has to be available to those users in one of those categories. We can't put something out on a website that a blind person can't, for lack of a better term, see or read. You can't put up a video that a blind person wouldn't be able to understand what's happening in the video. You can't put up an audio file that doesn't have a transcript so a deaf person could understand what was happening. Everybody has to be able to gain the same information from what we put up on our web presences. Additionally, it must be operable. That means everybody must be able to use and access the information the same way or have the ability to access it. So if your website can only be used by a mouse, you're not being operable to people who can't use mice. So you either have to have a way for someone to use it with a keyboard or to talk to speech or some other sort of accessible means. It must be understandable, which means your language has to be easy to comprehend or grasp. You shouldn't be using academic language that people with a learning disability may not be able to understand. You shouldn't be using overly complicated language that general people can't understand. Maybe if you're an engineer, you should speak a little lower to some people. not to call anybody out. It has to be user-friendly, essentially, and it must be robust, meaning that it has to be available for people using it now and people using it in the future. If you go back to websites created in like 1995, those are very clearly not accessible by today's standards. So I'm not really sure how you future-proof your websites, but you are required to future-proof your websites. So those 4 principles need to be applied to all of our web presences. That includes our social media, our YouTube, it includes Channel 97, anything that we're putting out into the community as a resource or information. That also includes our city's elected officials, so your own Facebooks, websites, anything that is a public information source does need to be ADA accessible. And then, of course, everything needs to be reasonable. There is a defense the city has that if it's not reasonable for us to do it, we may not have to do it. Doesn't mean we won't, but that is a defense.
I got a question there. So you're saying if you have a, Dallas, if you got a Facebook commission page, you're out of compliance, right?
No, sir. I wouldn't say you are in compliance. Facebook is, in and of itself, ADA accessible, being a huge company that it is. What you would want to make sure of, and we can provide training on this, is that images you're posting don't have information that can't be understood by a blind person. So you're not posting text and images, that you're using alt text, which we'll discuss a little bit later. But if you're just making Facebook posts of just text, you're compliant, because Facebook itself is ADA compliant. All right, so what's required for web presences and other media presences and best practices? So as I just mentioned, if photos and images are up, they need to have alt text. Alt text is, if you've ever been on a website and hovered your mouse over an image and then the little caption pops up, that little caption is alt text. We've gone through our entire website and made sure all of our images have alt text. Our new website actually requires it. That alt text needs to have enough information in it that a person who cannot see the image can gain the same information from the image as a person who can see the image. So if it's a picture of, let's say the railroad and some flowers, then your caption should be, it's a picture of a railroad with some flowers. It gets a little more complicated when we get into issues with graphs and charts, where the chart is conveying information. So you need to make sure your alt text conveys that same information. So if you have a graph like this one, my alt text would need to say, it is a graph that shows lawsuits in federal court. In 2013, there were this many. In 2014, there were this many, and et cetera, so that someone who couldn't actually see that graph could gain that same information. As I mentioned earlier, websites need to be able to be navigated with or without a mouse. The colors need to be distinguishable. There needs to be high contrast, so colorblind people or people with vision issues can understand and see it. Your posts need to be plain and simple, not above a standard reading level. All of your videos need to be closed captioned, so a deaf person can watch a video and still understand what's happening. Your links should be described. There's pretty specific language on how you should describe your links, but basically you shouldn't just put a link that says, I don't know, click here. It needs to say, click here for blah, 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 blah. And then the big one that is tripping up a lot of cities is PDFs. PDFs are not inherently ADA accessible. They cannot be read with a screen reader. So you have to make sure you format them to be able to be read by a screen reader. They also must have a logical structure and reading order. They have to have navigational aids. If you've ever opened a PDF and it has kind of the bookmarks on the side where you click and go chapter 1, chapter 2, those are navigational aids, so you have to have those. And then it must be able to be in a font that is readable and extractable by optical scan or screen readers. So a person with a screen reader can read the font. So what we're doing, we're happy to say that we are ADA compliant. Our website that we launched last year is ADA compliant. It meets the requirements in terms of alt text and the colors and the fonts. It's navigable by a keyboard or a mouse. A screen reader can read the text on it. We've checked our website using third-party compliance tools, a couple of them, to double check. In addition, we've added, in the side here you can see it, a widget called UserWay. UserWay is a free open source application that is provided to mainly governments to increase their level of accessibility. So adding that widget has allowed us to have additional keyboard navigation, higher contrast, allows you to make the fonts bigger on the page, to make the pictures go away, a lot of different readability and accessibility tools that we didn't have previously, but we do now have on our website. Additionally, we've added accessibility remediation notices to our website. So if you go to our website, there's a giant red bar across the top that says, hey, we're ADA accessible, but if you need anything, please let us know. Additionally, we have anybody who is a website editor or has the ability to post to our website is being required to attend ADA compliance training, as well as the city has purchased ADA compliant software to make PDFs ADA accessible for all of our website editors. So everything we go forward and put on the website will be ADA compliant and will continue to be ADA compliant. And in addition, we've made sure that all of our YouTube videos are closed caption, which is pretty self-explanatory. So transparency versus accessibility. Like I mentioned, we are currently ADA compliant. We're very ADA compliant. However, we've made some changes to ensure that, as you know, that we're not currently posting our agendas. Because we don't have a way to currently make those ADA compliant. That's an issue with readability. Channel 97, we don't have a transcription service, so we're not posting on Channel 97, but we can. And then there's other documents that must be posted on our website that we are posting. We are currently paying to have them remediated or having staff remediate them and put them on the website so they are ADA accessible but also meet those state laws. There are a couple of issues with that. One being this year, the House and the Senate, I guess the legislature, passed House Bill 861, which now requires that we post our budget on the website for 45 days. There used to be a law that said you had to post your budget on the website, but then you could just immediately take it down and still technically be in compliance. The new law says you have to be on the website for 45 days. One of the issues is budgets are inherently not very screen reader friendly because there are lots of columns and text and numbers, and they're really not non-accountant friendly. So there are a lot of cities who are working with the governor's office and the executive branch to figure out what exactly that means and how we can make it ADA accessible. We have a plan for how to do that when it comes to budget season, but it does cost a little bit of money. The main point I bring up with here is these three items. We've changed how we're doing business to ensure our ADA compliance, such as not posting our agenda packets for the public, not posting Channel 97 videos anymore. We can do all of those things and continue to be ADA compliant. There is a budget impact with all of these. Some of it's not a lot, some of it's very expensive. And if the commission wants us to look into any of these, we can have the numbers and talk about it in our budget season. But that is pretty much all I've got.
All right.
And Mr. Mayor, I just want to chime in. This has not been a 10-minute endeavor. The city attorney's office and several of our key staff people have invested a lot of time studying this and taking steps to make sure that we are in compliance with the ADA. So that we felt it was important for our elected officials and the community at large to understand what the law says and how it's impacted us. To Dallas's last slide, transparency versus accessibility. There are some appearances that maybe we're not being as accessible, now let me make sure I get this right, as transparent as we used to be with the way we post agendas and things like that. There were more ways to see our information prior to this legislation being brought to our attention. It's in no way an attempt to be less transparent. It's just simply trying to comply with the law and strike that balance. So if folks are saying, why aren't you doing things like you used to do, it is without a doubt that that these ADA laws require us to approach our business a little bit differently, and that's why we felt it was important to get this information. It's nothing that the city's doing to not provide as much information as we always had. It's just the format in which we get it out there.
All right, any comments from the commission?
Yes, sir.
Go ahead. Mr. Farnsworth.
Dallas, do you have any idea of that 10,000 lawsuits, how many were deemed frivolous?
I do not, no.
And is there any law that says we have to present the website in a different language other than English?
Commissioner Farmers, almost none of the lawsuits are frivolous because the technology is catching up with the lawsuits. In other words, they're being filed at a rapid pace, and a lot of the governments smaller than the city of Newberry, and budgets much smaller than Newberry can't comply, and they're just taking down their websites and just saying, look, we can't rebuild it without just taking it down. So in almost every one of those instances, it's an automatic attorney's fees situation. So if you're not compliant and you haven't done all the things that city staff has done, and Dallas leading the charge on this, then you're a bit of a sitting duck, and you're going to get assessed attorney's fees. So it's a very difficult situation, to say the least.
You know, it's a good idea that's gone bad in my opinion.
It's a very difficult legal situation right now, and I think it's a bit like the public records and law that we've had, where it's been misused in some ways to generate attorney's fees, unfortunately.
Do you know anything about the requirements regarding an English-only website, or how to eventually be compliant?
I don't know, Andrea. I think there may be some lawsuits down in South Florida that have to have dual language provisions. I'm not sure about that. Seems like I heard something along those lines.
Right. I'm going to squeeze in next to you, Dallas. Right now, there was a case that was thinking about Spanish ballots, Spanish language on the ballots. As far as websites, there hasn't been a lot of talk about a different language for ADA compliance. Typically, Google has like an auto translator. I believe you can actually go up to the top of almost any website, and it translates for you automatically. I don't know if that's a Google feature or just internet-wide, but I believe that's all through the internet versus the individual websites.
I believe the website has that.
It's another reason to make English our official language of this nation, so that we don't have these kind of problems.
Any more comments from the commission or Commissioner Martin?
Yeah, these kind of things, they really kind of get under my skin. This is a situation, in my opinion, that we have a few people with an agenda. They drive up the costs of government, other organizations like ours, not only financially but from a human resource perspective. And it's just very aggravating and disappointing that someone would kind of set out to be malicious about it to begin with, because it ends up hurting other well-intentioned folks who are trying to actually get the information. So we have a few people or persons affecting the majority, and that's just very aggravating to me.
Any public comments? Well, Mr. Dallas, you did really good there. Appreciate it, and you have a good evening. All right, so we're going to go to item D, and I know you're all looking at this and going, wait a minute, there's not an item D. Yes, there is. We got a surprise, and y'all bear with me. I actually have to read this without maybe the deep southern twang, but this is going to Dr. Hersom. Yeah, Dr. Matt Hersom. This is I haven't known Matt that long, but I'm going to tell y'all something. This guy's incredible. What he has to deal with daily, it's unbelievable what this man's got to deal with all the time. His work, his home life, saved his wife, and he's off at a conference. Am I correct? Conference? Yeah. And a man's heart quits beating. And only the good Lord Jesus Christ said, you know what, Matt's going to be here to save this man. So I got a proclamation here to read. All right? And bear with me. There are no small acts of compassion. Each one is a victory for peace, and each brings us all closer to a better world. And that's from Robert Silverstein. Whereas the City of Newberry, Mayor and Commission are proud to honor Commissioner Matthew Matt Hersom for his dedication to our community and residents, and whereas Matt has lived in Newberry for over 15 years and served the community on the Planning and Zoning Board and History Architect Review Board and as a city commissioner. And whereas Matt and his family organized the Sam Strong 5K charity event for 4 years to raise money for muscular dystrophy research, whereas Matt is a professor at the University of Florida Institute of Food and Agricultural Resource College, Animal Science Department, and whereas in June 2015, Matt performed CPR on his wife after her heart had stopped, giving emergency personnel time to arrive, ultimately saving her life. And whereas 4 years later, June 2019, when Matt was out of the state at a meeting, a stranger turned blue, had no pulse. Matt was able to get her heart started again and save another life. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed that I, Rick Coleman, Mayor Pro Temp of the City of Newberry, on behalf of the City Commission, do hereby acknowledge and thank Matthew Hersom for his selflessness devotion. He is a true hometown hero, and Newberry is a better place to live because of him. In witness whereof I have hereunto set my hand and caused the great seal of the City of Newberry, Florida, in the state of Florida to be affixed at Newberry, Florida, this 24th day of June 2019. Okay, come on, Matt. Hey. Hey, I've been here 6 years and I've never been able to do this. This is going to be fun. Come on. Oh, it's yours. Give me a minute here. All right, Matt. Congratulations, man. Speech. Speech.
Certainly, I'd like to thank whoever was responsible for this. Thank you for reading the proclamation, Ricky. When somebody needs help, it's incumbent upon any of us to help that person, and I was fortunate to be available and willing, and sometimes that's all it takes is a few moments of courage to do something to help somebody. And so I was fortunate to be able to hear that evening that lady was going to make a full recovery and be able to return home the next day. And so that was the important thing, that she was be able to go home and be with her family the next day, and that's really what mattered in that situation. Thank you.
Any other comments? From the public? All right. Well, thank you. Man, you're awesome, man. You're awesome. I got some cows you need to look at for me to do. All right. Public announcement. This is the non-controversial announcements, for like if there's a greased pig or what else is another one? Goat ropings, whatever for, what was that? Yeah, garage sale, lost dogs. Going once, going twice. Okay. All right. We have none tonight. All right, consent agenda. Does anyone want to discuss any of the items on the consent agenda, commission or public? You have a motion to?
Move to approve.
Second.
We've got a motion by Commissioner Farnsworth and a second by Commissioner Martin. Any discussion? Okay. All right, and, what else is left? That's it, ain't it? Besides voting? Huh? Yeah, we got to vote for it. So all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. So that's 5-0. We did good there. All right, now we're going to go on to public hearings and ordinances.
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, I'll read this by title only. This would be ordinance number 2019-15, an ordinance of the City of Newberry amending the text of the land development regulations to add section 4.22 entitled Commercial Kennels, Veterinary Clinics, and Animal Shelters located on arterial highways within agricultural, and to amend section 4.4.5.10 agricultural special exceptions, providing severability, repealing all ordinances in conflict, and providing an effective date. Appropriate motion is to pass ordinance number 2019-15 as read by title only.
All right, and our staff presentation is by Mr. Brian Thomas.
Thank you, Mr.
Got
Mayor.
it, buddy.
Staff's recommended action is to approve ordinance 2019-15 on first reading. Just a brief review in history. Our current LDRs treat basically all facilities that house small animals as open air facilities, which in the past could be problematic because of the noise generated from a lot of barking dogs and that sort of thing. We only have two categories that allow for kennels and veterinary clinics and such, which is the commercial intensive district, allowed by right if it's in a soundproof building, and allowed by special exception only in agricultural districts. As I said, it has to be in CI. It has to be a soundproof building, whereas regardless of the type of facility, the agricultural district requires, through special exception, a 300-foot property setback line, which is very difficult to establish even on a fairly large piece of property. We discovered that even the county allows for these facilities to be built within 50 feet of the property line, provided that they're enclosed and essentially soundproofed. And so staff presented this concept back on May 25th to the commission, asking for direction to move forward. The commission granted that and directed staff to draft an ordinance and come back with those amendments as suggested, and further directed that the commission wanted to maintain the control that a special exception process gives them on an individual basis. So the approval in agriculture would still be by special exception. Staff drafted an ordinance and presented it to the Planning and Zoning Board on June 3rd. Planning and Zoning Board recommended unanimously for approval to the Commission of the ordinance, with one exception. They were concerned that the 4-acre minimum requirement as proposed in the ordinance would be limiting to a veterinary clinic that maybe only needs an acre or 2 acres, and had that as an option on a arterial roadway. Went back and listened to the discussion on the video several times to make sure it was very clear on it, and so the intent was very clear. They just didn't want to limit veterinary clinics that don't also offer overnight boarding for convenience to be limited to the 4 acres. And so rather than actually strike veterinary clinics, we'll go through in a moment how we address that to meet the intent. So the amendments in the draft ordinance amend section 4.4.5, which is the definition for agricultural zoning districts. It does allow by special exception to place these facilities within 50 feet of the property line, provided they meet the criteria established in the next amendment. It did not change anything about open air facilities. They would still need to be 300 feet from the property line, and it didn't change anything relative to the commercial intensive zoning category. And then the amendment does add section 4.2.40, which is the criteria that they would have to meet to qualify to have the 50-foot setback line. And so section 4.2.40, minimum lot area would be 4 acres. That should give adequate room for a relatively large facility and still be able to fall within the 50-foot setback line on all sides. The structures housing the animals have to be essentially soundproof. They need to be, still would have to be located a minimum of 50 feet or more from the property line. And if they're surrounded by residential, they would have to have a 200-foot, just to ensure that there wasn't conflict between the commercial use and the residential use. And so, for instance, in ag, if it's surrounded by ag, then the 50-foot would hold, but if there was residential on one side, they would have to do 200 on that side, and 50 feet they could do on the ag adjacent side. Anticipate that in the future, if you have a facility and a residential development wants to go in next to it, it could be handled in one of two ways. It would either become a grandfathered non-conforming use, or as we've done in other situations, we would have a requirement that the neighborhood would have, the subdivision would have to require a deed restriction that made notice of the fact that there's an active kennel there basically before the neighborhood. It could be handled in a couple of different ways. A minimum of 25-foot landscape buffer between the facility and adjacent properties, and to ensure again that there's minimal conflict, if any, between adjacent uses. They would not be able to take the animals outside and walk them or exercise them until after 7 a.m. in the morning, and have to be done by 9 p.m. at night. And then here's where, overnight boarding no more than 30 days, so it's not a permanent thing. And then here's where staff altered a little bit from the direct direction from the Planning and Zoning Board, which is veterinary clinics that do not provide overnight boarding services are not subject to the 4-acre minimum lot size. And now if they were a veterinary clinic that actually provided those overnight boarding services for convenience, then they would still be required to meet the 4-acre minimum. But if they have overnight just for medical purposes as part of their treatment for a veterinary clinic, that would not trigger the requirement to have 4 acres. That would be just part of their normal operations, and they could do that on a smaller than 4-acre parcel. And so that concludes the staff
All right.
presentation.
Discussion with the commission here?
Need a motion first. Do we have a motion already?
No, it's just discussion first, and then commissioner makes a motion, and it is seconded. This is what my sheet shows. All right, if you want to go that way.
Your sheet is wrong.
Sheet is wrong.
All right.
I was on the
Somebody
state
wanna make a
parliamentary
motion?
procedure team.
I have to agree with Commissioner Martin on that.
Am I wrong?
It's a procedural
Which
thing.
way is it?
Technically, your paper is wrong, but it's a procedural thing that we don't get too wound up about.
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, I think that after staff makes the presentation, it is not inappropriate to have general discussion regarding the item presented prior to the making of a motion. I don't think there's any rule that precludes the commission from
This
having
is what I
discussion.
learned in FFA, in parliamentary procedure.
That was a Mayo then.
Everybody's right.
Everybody's right.
All right,
Woe is the
any-
peacemakers.
any discussion with the commission? Go ahead. Mr. Northwick?
Is anything on this ordinance going to affect the Newberry Animal Hospital that's in their existing condition, what they're doing now?
Mr. Mayor, there should not be anything in this that would affect them. Are we talking about the one on State Road 45? No, so that's actually in a commercial intensive district already, so they can do it by right, as we discussed earlier, so they'd be fine.
Any other discussion?
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. I don't have any problem supporting the ordinance. I just want to bring to attention, we're kind of focused a little bit on dogs, but I want to make sure it doesn't run us afoul of anything over at Canterbury in its proximity to Newberry Oaks, because I know that periodically they've had boarding services in there at the horse stables. Again, it's been there way before Newberry Oaks ever was, but just putting it out there.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, just to address that briefly, this really does only address some small animal boarding. The large animals are handled in a different section of code.
All right, somebody want to offer a motion?
Motion to approve ordinance 2019-15.
Second.
So we got a motion by Commissioner Herson and a second by Commissioner Martin. Any public discussion on this? Okay. All right, so all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Ayes have it. All right, we'll do it, Mark. All right. Now B, we got Jamie Jones, and our city attorney is going to read this. What's this? Yeah, the first reading of ordinance 2019-17.
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, this is an ordinance pertaining to utilities within the City of Newberry, amending Chapter 98 of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Newberry, adopting an electric service policy manual, and authorizing the city staff to further adopt policies and procedures for the utilities, repealing all ordinances in conflict and providing an effective date. The appropriate motion will be to pass ordinance number 2019-17 upon its first reading by title only.
Mr. Jamie Jones, so this is amending the electric ordinance to allow for a electric service policy.
Yes, Mayor, Commissioners. Ordinances in themselves are not easy to amend and not
Right.
easy to change. And what we've done is put together the nuts and bolts guideline for the day-to-day operation of the electric department, characteristics of service, type of metering, and what interaction and processes we would have with developers, the customers, contractors. And what we've asked you to do is incorporate this by reference and give us the authority to update it as standards in the industry change, construction technique changes, where we don't have to come back and amend the Code of Ordinances every time a new material is developed or a new construction technique is being approved by the National Electric Safety Code. So it would be staff's recommendation that you adopt ordinance 2019-17 on first reading.
So moved.
Second.
So it's got by Commissioner Farnsworth and second by Commissioner Martin. All right, discussion by the commission? Any from the public? All right. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Everybody ayed? All right.
And Mr. Mayor, I'll just point out while Jamie's taking a seat that this policy's been a little while in coming. Jamie's put a lot of effort into it along with the city's attorney's office. Also, it's in keeping with Commission's directives to make Newberry an easier place to develop rather than subject developers and contractors to our Code of Ordinances, and they have to go through there and decipher the pertinent code related to electrical installations. We've put it all in one manual. So this should be something that moving forward makes development life in Newberry a little bit easier.
Right. All right. And speaking of development, this next item is Resolution 2019-22. Something that all of us on the commission with this option of discount for developers and fees. So take it over, Big Brian. Oh, and you're going to be reading it. Sorry.
This is a resolution of the City of Newberry, 2019-22, a resolution of the City Commission of the City of Newberry, Florida, providing for a schedule of refunds of fees and charges for matters pertaining to commercial development in the City of Newberry as specified in Section 14-110, Fees Enumerated, Section 98-192, Charge Imposed, and Section 98-172, Charge Imposed of the City of Newberry Land Development Regulations, and Resolution 2018-08 to stimulate economic development, providing qualification criteria, providing severability, repealing all resolutions in conflict, and providing an effective date. The appropriate motion will be to pass resolution number 2019-22 upon its reading by title only. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Back in December, staff recommendation is to receive presentation and provide additional direction to staff as the commission deems necessary, not necessarily looking for a vote to enact the resolution at this time, unless the commission likes what they see as it is and votes to move forward. We had, just a brief review, staff had presented a series of informational presentations on the development fees relative to the planning process, the utility process, the building department fees for plan reviews and building permits and such. And so the commission directed staff to go back and draft a program based on staff recommendations made at that time relative to those various fees. The idea being that we wanted to incentivize commercial development in the city of Newberry, stimulate economic development by putting out the message that the city of Newberry is actively encouraging new commercial business. And so, as I said, the commission directed staff to come back with a proposal for a program. We did this via using the resolution as the vehicle. So the draft resolution, what it tries to accomplish is providing for refunds for new commercial construction only or the expansion of existing commercial businesses. The amount of the refund would be a negotiated amount between the developer and the city commission. The way that staff anticipates that would happen would be the staff would do the initial negotiating based on the criteria that they meet and then present it to the commission for commission's review and approval. And it would be based on, to the extent that they meet or exceed design standards in our code, new jobs created and capital investment. It would provide for up to 100% refund of the first $10,000 in development-related fees for each commercial project. And then if their total fees exceeded $10,000, it could also provide for a 50% refund on those fees over and above $10,000 up to a maximum of 50. So it would ultimately, you'd have the 100% up to $10,000 and then 50% up for the next $40,000 for another $20,000 potential maximum refund of $30,000. The total amount citywide would be limited to $50,000 in total refunds per budget year, unless it proved to be very successful, and then the commission could, of course, raise that in the future. But any addition, once we reach that $50,000 limit, the commission we'd have to come back to the commission and request it if they wanted to increase that for additional funding. Be paid out of the city's general fund, and the development fees would be paid up front and then refunded after staff did a compliance review. So once the project was complete and staff verified that they had met all of the requirements in the negotiated agreement, then staff could sign off and they could be cut their refund check based on the negotiated amount. Some alternatives that could be discussed as an alternative, if the commission didn't want to take the extra time to do the approval of each of these, they could establish a specific set of criteria and then hand it over to staff to do the negotiating and approval, provided it strictly met those criteria. Or we could go the direction that all commercial projects automatically would qualify for the $10,000 and then 50% more up to 20 more thousand, provided they met specific criteria. And so there wouldn't really be any negotiating involved. It would be, if you meet these criteria, you automatically qualify. And then we could also put in a annual reauthorization by resolution, or sunset it at a certain date in the future, come back and reauthorize by resolution. I do want to point out something that wasn't put in here, but that the finance director has asked me to remind everybody is, if If the commission approves this, then basically the funding would be coming out of the general fund reserve fund. So the amount of reserves would be reduced potentially by $50,000 if we had enough commercial projects to take advantage of that. And so that concludes my presentation.
Okay. Let's don't vote on this yet. Let's commission, let's have a discussion, and I think Commissioner Martin is wanting to pop right on up here, so go ahead, sir.
Brian, thanks for putting your heads together and getting this in front of us. I think it gets us pointed in a pretty good and fair direction. There's a few things that I like. The idea of specificity is attractive to me, only from the standpoint of I don't really want to put the staff in the spot of picking winners and losers, or showing favoritism, or even being accused of showing any kind of favoritism. So I think the more specific we can get, and that should, in the process side, probably come from us. This specificity also kind of takes out the negotiating part. Maybe there's a hitch in there that we can look outside of the specifics if the developer comes before us and wants to discuss it a little bit more in depth. I just don't want to put that onus onto the staff. I think they could become a leverage point between the staff, or between the developer and the public, the public via the commission. I don't necessarily want to see that. I think the annual reauthorization could be a good tool also from the standpoint of this isn't an ongoing thing. It's not going to slip under the radar if we forget about it, and also allows us to kind of update with the times. I have communicated to staff here pretty recently. I'm kind of really in this quandary of additional, particularly residential development, because of what the school board's not doing with the schools and the capacities there. This doesn't necessarily coincide with any of the commercial projects, but if you have a developer that comes to us with some sort of a mixed use, I'm not really sure how that's going to be handled. Is there a provision even in here for mixed use stuff, or we're strictly talking about commercial and commercial only?
Mr. Mayor, it would be strictly commercial, but the mixed-use component would easily qualify under this as well.
Okay. So there might be a little bit of overlap there with regards to schooling capacity. From what the superintendent told us at the last meeting, they're adding classrooms at the middle school, but I forgot to ask whether that's a net gain or not if they take out the portables. There doesn't seem to be any expansion plans for the elementary school or the high school in, I think it was the next 5 years. Both of which are kind of over capacity already. Those are a couple of immediate thoughts, but I'll yield to anybody else.
Any more commission comment? Go ahead. Commissioner Norfleet?
The development fees that are paid in now, what fund do they go into?
Mr. Mayor, it depends on the fee, but say the planning-related fees for if you do a land use change or rezoning or site plan review go into the general fund. The building permit fees go into, they're accounted for a little bit differently because there are strict requirements that your building department has to follow in terms of the fees it can charge. It's supposed to be relatively balanced. But again, they currently go into the general fund as well. And then the capacity fees, development fees for utilities, water and wastewater go into a special fund that's basically set aside for the future expansion of those facilities.
So those fees that would be refunded wouldn't necessarily have been in the budget item to begin with, right?
That is correct. That's why it would have to come out of the general fund reserve account at this point. Going forward, the commission would have if they like the program, decided to reauthorize it, they could then, staff would, I imagine, then be directed to budget for it on an annual basis.
Any other discussion?
Yeah, now those fees are charged to cover the city's cost, or?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, it basically covers an array of issues from staff time to advertising costs to, again, like we said, the capacity fees go towards the future development of wastewater plant, expansion of the wastewater plant or water facilities. And so there's a broad array of what it covers, but also the operational costs as far as everything from the light bill to the building maintenance.
So we're proposing taking taxpayers' money and give it to a developer to offset their fees.
Ultimately, that is what would be occurring, but the flip side is the additional cap, since this is for new and expansion projects only, new construction projects, ultimately it gets paid back in the additional tax revenues that are generated from that facility. And so, in a very general sense, a property that's assessed at about $500,000 by the property appraiser's office is going to yield about $3,000 in tax revenues on an annual basis from the millage rate. And so, as it goes up from there, $1 million facility would be $6,000. And so, if it's limited to $30,000 refund is going to be yielding probably a pretty substantial capital investment facility, and it would be paid back in fairly short order, less than 10 years, I imagine, when you factored in all the other issues.
And that includes your tangible too that you have to count too. Tangible tax will be coming in.
Is there any documentation as to how successful this type of program is, or is this just a, well, let's try it and see what happens kind of thing?
Mr. Mayor, we don't actually have any documentation. It is an idea, a concept to try to stimulate economic development activity, but also send a message outward to the business community that Newberry is very serious about economic development and business friendly and drawing in more businesses. It's one more tool in the economic development toolbox that we've been developing over the last 4 years. The other thing that I kind of like about this is most of our tools we have right now don't give us a means to incentivize retail type commercial operations, and this actually would qualify any commercial operation because our economic development ad valorem tax exemptions are specific to a targeted industry list, whereas this covers the broad range of basically all commercial.
I just want to clarify something that Commissioner Farnsworth said. He said it was taxpayer dollars, but this is a refund, so it is dollars that were already paid by the developer.
Yes. Mr. Mayor, that would be correct. They're going to prepay these up front, right, and then they're going to be refunded upon compliance review.
So, and I don't necessarily have a big problem with any of that other than the future capacity dollars that, we're giving money, we're refunding money back that is supposed to be set aside to allow for future expansion as a result of the expansion. And so that's the only, that's my major, that causes me a little bit of concern that we're moving dollars back out of the budget that are to be set aside for the same opportunities that we're trying to create.
Mr. Mayor, just to clarify, they'll still be there. Those funds are still going to go into that fund. They will not be removed from that fund because that actually is a separate fund. That's why the funding for this would come out of the general fund instead, because we can't actually pull it out of that fund. And so, in that respect,
City Manager Moon.
And Mr. Mayor, I was going to clarify that. Commissioner Norfleet brought up the issue of what specific fees, all the utility-related capacity fees that we collect, our borrowing covenants, whether it's a bond or whether it's a loan, don't allow us to waive or reduce those fees. So to make those fees up, to reimburse those fees, we'd actually be pulling funding out of the general fund. It's what we discussed. I believe it was in November. It's November, December that we brought this forward. And I think that at that time we kind of set a threshold of try it and see how it works, but a not to exceed amount. We would kind of cut the program off there and report to the commission how it worked before we tried any more, is the best of my recollection.
Any more discussion? Commissioner Martin?
I think I personally would like to digest on this a little bit, and maybe if you can forward us some scenarios with break-even analysis on them. That would help me. I don't know about the other guys.
Yeah.
Does anybody want to make a motion, or do we want to
Well,
continue
I
this?
just want to clarify something, because maybe I'm a little confused, but the money that we get from the developers, these fees that we get are to cover our cost. If we give that money back to them, or a portion of that money, then we have to take money out of the general fund, which is put in there by taxpayers, to cover those costs that were incurred by the city. So, is that correct?
Mr. Mayor, that is correct, yes. The fees are being paid in advance as part of the fees, but it would be money that would then, all of those costs that those fees covered would then be covered by taxpayer revenues instead.
All right, any discussion from the public? All right, does anyone want to make a motion, or do we want to continue this?
I would support Commissioner Martin's concept of, if we can have a couple break-even scenarios, just to see,
Yeah.
at what level are we losing money out of the general fund, or what level is it, of development do we need to be targeting? Just to feel more comfortable with that. I like the concept. I don't have a problem with the concept, but I'd like the opportunity to see some of those scenarios run.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm 90% of the way there, but just a couple of those things.
Okay, so I'm going to say it died without a motion, but it's going to be continued. Is that, all right.
Do we need a motion to table it, or?
Do we need that?
That would
No, there
be-
wasn't ever a motion, but,
Okay.
It would be best to
Okay.
make a motion.
so can we get a motion to continue this? All right, got and a second? Second. So we got a motion from Commissioner Norfleet and a second by Commissioner Martin to continue it.
When do we plan to continue it to?
Lord, I knew that was coming.
Mr. Mayor, I believe we'll bring it back in July, but I think we're happy to just re-advertise via the agenda. No, this does need a date certain, doesn't it, because it's a resolution? Can we bring it back by July the 22nd?
Mr. Mayor, we should definitely be able to have it back before then.
Are you good with that? Okay. July 22nd?
Yep.
Okay, all in favor by saying aye?
Aye.
Aye with me. All right, goes to 5-0. All right. Now we got Big Ben here, and item B, fire service agreement.
Good evening, Mayor and Commission.
Big Ben.
Before you tonight is the fire services agreement between the City of Newberry and Alachua County Fire Rescue. The recommended action from staff is two-part. First one being approve the proposed fire service agreement and authorize the mayor to execute the agreement contingent upon approval by the Board of County Commission. The second portion of that is, should the Board of County Commission not approve the proposed fire services agreement, authorize staff to provide notice to Alachua County of our intent to terminate the current fire services agreement. If you'll, I want to bring something to everybody's attention on your agenda summary. The last paragraph, there's a typo where it indicates this is a 5-year contract term. It's actually a 4, what you have in your agenda packet. My apologies for that typo. Okay, wow, that really didn't turn out good. Really small. Okay. The highlights of the negotiations between Alachua County and the City of Newberry. We started negotiations back in November of 18. The current fire services agreement expires at midnight on September 30th, 2019. This slide has some bullet points that indicates the high points and the highlights of what we were able to change and get modified. The proposed FSA, as I Fire Services Agreement, better known as FSA. It's for a period of 4 years, beginning in FY20, which will be October 1 of 20, going through September 30th of 23. If you'll recall, that was one of the things that our commission, along with the Board of County Commission, wanted to see was a longer term on these agreements. Just as a side note to that first bullet point, in the agreement, anytime after September 30th of 2019, the city has the ability to open up the agreement to renegotiate the contract amount. One of the things that was somewhat it was contentious at times, not during negotiations, but over the years, was level of service standards. As we've described in several of our commission meetings, the level of service that Newberry provides versus some other departments that are municipal departments within the county, those aren't comparing apples to apples. One of the things that we did during this negotiation process was create a tier system. There's a tier 1 and a tier 2. The tier 2 department, which Newberry will be, which is the highest level of service within the county. The requirements of tier 2 require 4-person daily staffing, ALS capabilities, and staff comprised of state certified lieutenants and driver operators. One of the other highlights is the employee exchange program will continue during this agreement. As most of you know, we have that employee exchange program. It's been in effect for 19 years now, creeping up on 20. That allows us to provide first response ALS services within the municipal limits in our response area in unincorporated Alachua County. The county sends us paramedic firefighter every day. We send them firefighter EMT every day. The one caveat to that is as you've seen in the budget, and the fire department budget the last couple of years in our training and certification, about half of our training budget is going towards training and sending personnel in-house to paramedic school so we can become ALS on our own. That was direction that the commission gave a couple of years ago. We have one person go last year. We have one person currently in school this budget year, and we're getting ready to advertise the opportunity to go for this coming budget year. And again, that's in-house. We're working towards becoming ALS on our own. And what that means is we're going to be able to do non-transport ALS. Basically, our level of service will stay the same as we currently have today, but it'll be standalone without the exchange program. One of the things that I was, during negotiations, Chief Theus and I really, we discussed it briefly, and he was all on board with it. When we do obtain the proper ALS staffing in the future, ACFR agrees to provide us with that COPN, the Certificate of Public Need and Necessity, for non-transport, obviously. That has to come from the county, as by state statute, they hold that COPN. But they've agreed to provide that to us and to help us get to where we need to be as far as medical director and all that kind of stuff. That all kind of goes into COPN. One of the biggest things that we were able to do during negotiations was the methodology matrix as to the funding itself. I don't know if everybody recalls, but nobody could explain, including me, how we came, our last 3 years, the current contract was 3 years, it was 175, 175, 185. 175,000 first year, 175 second year, 185 third year. Well, nobody could explain how that number came about. The county couldn't, we couldn't. It was a random number. So what we were able to do was to, and you'll see it in the fire services agreement that everybody should have a copy of. There's a methodology matrix in there that also provides for a CPI increase per call on an annual basis. So every year, if the CPI was 2.5, the per call cost, which right now it's in this agreement for tier 2, it's $713.39 per call. That would increase by, say the CPI was 2.5, that $713.39 would increase by 2.5%. So that's something that helps absorb some of the costs increased cost of providing the service. The final thing is the reciprocity. The reciprocity has been in this agreement for at least 6 years. The county, over the life of the current agreement, we've always budgeted for some reciprocity payments back to the county. And what the reciprocity payments, where they come from is, if we were on another call and the county had to come into the municipal limits of the city of Newberry to provide that service while we were on another call, then we owed them the reciprocity payment to them for whatever the amount was. Currently, in the current agreement, that amount is $362. The new agreement, as I mentioned before, with Tier 2, the total amount, or the agreed upon amount, is $713.39. So what that means to us in Newberry is, if we run about 300 calls. About 30% of our calls are in unincorporated Alachua County on an annual basis. 300 calls a year at $362, that's $108,000. Obviously, that doesn't cover the cost for providing the service into the unincorporated Alachua County. If we run about 300 calls a year in the unincorporated Alachua County, and I'll clarify that, that's unincorporated Alachua County, including the cities that Alachua County Fire Rescue provides first response services to. For instance, Archer, City of Alachua, they don't have their own fire departments. They contract with Alachua County, or they pay into the MSBU. And then that cost was $362 currently in the agreement. The cost for those same 300 calls, roughly 300 calls, at $713.39, is about $214,000. So we run, the county runs approximately 15 to 20 calls a year that will be compensable calls into the city limits of Newberry. And like anything else, I mean, there's absolutely no way we can say it's going to be 15 or 50. Right. I mean, it just depends on the calls for service. But one of the things that we continued through this agreement, and Chief Theus initially wasn't aware that it was in the agreement, but I directed him where it was at. The city, if the city's on a county call, and then the county has to come into the municipal limits of the city of Newberry, that's not a compensable call. The thought process is we'd be able to run our own call if we weren't running your call.
Right.
So that's not a compensable call. So the only time that we owe the county any money, that's why that number's 15 to 20 a year, is if we're on another municipal call and they come into the city limits of Newberry and run a call because we're on that other call, then it's a compensable call. We owe them money. One of the unique things about this particular agreement is the city of Newberry is never going to write Alachua County a check. There's going to be a net out at the end of each calendar year. We're going to say, okay, we ran X number of calls in the county between January 1 and March of each calendar year. Chief Theus and Newberry Fire Chief are going to sit down and they're going to talk about, hey, this is how many calls we ran. We're going to pull those numbers from CAD. They're going to be verifiable calls, and we're going to say, okay, we ran 300 calls in Alachua County. Same CAD report. Alachua County ran 15 calls into Newberry. You take 713, or 713 times 300 equals X. 15 or 20 times 713 equals X. You subtract the county's calls into Newberry, or the amount from what we were owed, and then divide that by 12, and that's what our new monthly payment will be starting in the next fiscal year. So there's a rhyme or reason now to why we get to those numbers. And that was big. That was big for Chief Theus, and it was big for us here in Newberry as well. Being here quite a few years, and honestly, I can never explain to you how that number came about. I mean, it just seemed like a fight to get to a number. So that wasn't the case this time. So that was good to see. But that's the end of the presentation. Quick 2 slides. Sorry for the font. But
All right, so, I guess the recommended action is to approve the proposed fire service agreement and authorize the mayor to execute the agreement contingent upon approval by the Board of County Commission. Should the Board of County Commission not approve the proposed fire service agreement, authorize staff to provide notice to the Alachua County of our intent to terminate the current fire service agreement. And as I said, this is a 4-year contract.
correct.
And we're increasing the city funding is $207,000
That will be for FY20.
for 2020.
We're currently at 185 now.
Okay.
Does that need to be in one motion?
Discussion.
Does
Yeah.
it need to be in two? One.
All right, somebody want to make a motion?
Move to approve.
Second? Second. I got a Farnsworth and then seconded by Commissioner Norfleet. Any discussion? Go ahead.
I don't have
Commissioner
any on the
Martin.
contract, but I'll ask something else. So you're trying to get all the fire employees trained as a paramedics, is that correct?
Correct. And it won't be all of them. For instance, we have some folks that are 22, 23-year employees. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to send them to paramedic school. It's going to take a year to get through.
Yeah.
And then, 2 or 3 years, 4 years from that, they're gone.
Right.
So it's kind of defeated our purpose. So we've kind of started out with our less senior people that have shown an interest to go. We had a full-time employee that his family, had some family situations. He moved, so he left us. We tried to hire a paramedic. Weren't quite able to hire the paramedic, but we were able to hire somebody that's already in paramedic school.
Mm-hmm.
So that gives us what I call a +1.
Okay.
So we're trying to hire paramedics through attrition as well.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. Is the city paying for their education?
Yes, sir.
Is there any guarantee that if they get their license as a paramedic and they decide to leave the fire department in a week after that or some short period after that, is there any reimbursement on?
Yes, sir. We have a contract. All the employees that the city sends through paramedic school, there's a 3-year contract term. And it's prorated. The first, I believe it's 12 months, they have to pay back 100%. Additionally, if they don't pass the National Registry, within 6 months, they have to start paying back the full amount that the city's paid for their program as well. But if they leave within 12 months, I believe it's 100%, and then it goes like 12 to 24, it's 66% or somewhere in there. I think it's broke down over like a 6 or 8 month span. I don't have that in front of me
That's
right
fine.
now. But there is a contract, and after the 3 years is up, and the 3 years is after they've obtained their national register, once that 3 years is up, then they're free and clear.
I mean, I think it's awesome that we're doing that. Really
Yeah,
do.
the commission's approved it in the budget, so I mean, we've asked for it, and you guys got on board with us, so that's been a plus.
Good deal.
Commissioner Martin?
I don't necessarily want to step on any toes politically with an immediate termination notification. Do you see any wiggle room, especially if it's something ticky-tack? How is...
The current agreement expires, and the attorney can probably correct me if I'm wrong on this, but it expires on September 30th, but I believe there's a continuation of that agreement within the current agreement. But if we don't notice them, and see, it wouldn't even go into effect until the next fiscal year. Basically, when you terminate, you got to notice them by X date, which I think is December 31st. We'd have to notice them and then take it through basically negotiations again until we get to September 3rd. Once we notify them by December 31st, if they don't approve it, we'd have to notice them by December 31st of this year. Then it would go into effect September 1 of the following year. So 2020 is when it gives you time to figure out what you're going to do if you don't have those agreements. So it's still a year out. It's not going to go into effect September 30th if we notice it.
And Chief Buckner, their staff supports this agreement. So
Correct. Their staff supports it, and on another note, the city's legal team and the county's legal team has given it the green light. So it's, I think everything, I sat through a couple of the county commission meetings to listen to what their wants were with these contracts for fire service agreements, and everything that they mentioned in those talks are addressed in these agreements.
Any more public comment? Commission comment?
It's pretty much a technicality that we have to notice.
No, I understand, and I understand, and I've just been around too long to see the stars align between staffs, and it gets to the dais and something goes sideways over, a talking point or some what I would perceive as something minuscule. So that was really just my concern.
Mr. Farnsworth?
So, I mean, he doesn't actually have to terminate it at that moment. I mean, you can, it's up to your discretion to,
We just have to notice them. Basically, if we don't notice them, we're gonna be at 185 again. Their current agreement's gonna remain in full force and effect, I believe.
Mr. Mayor, we provided notice before December 31st last year.
Correct.
And what was the content of our notice?
The
'Cause this board approved us sending that
Correct.
information.
Correct. And providing that notice was to get us to where we are here. To this new agreement that's supposed to meet all the criteria that both boards had said, hey, we want a longer agreement. Hey, let's figure out a way to come up with a real funding mechanism or a matrix of the funding mechanism. How do we get to that number? All those things were items that were discussed, but we did notice them, as Manager New stated, because this contract does terminate September 30th of this year. But, so I guess in essence, what would actually happen is it would be over with already come September 30th of this year. The contract would terminate. But that was the whole crux to get us to where we are today.
Any more comments? Any public comment on the motion? All right, so we got, we got a motion, so, all in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, passes 5-0.
And, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to express my gratitude to Chief Buckner. He's been working on this for now 6 months. We've been meeting with Chief Theus. They've had a lot of issues to resolve, and they've knocked them all down. So I appreciate that. I'd also like to just advise the commission regarding this paramedic trade program that we have with Alachua County. It benefits Newberry residents greatly by providing ALS service. If our firefighters get to the scene ahead of an ambulance, and right now that doesn't always happen, but the ambulance could be tied up somewhere. We arrive at a scene. We have a paramedic on the truck. It's a county employee that could provide life-saving support until the ambulance does arrive. That benefits Newberry residents. However, the county, and has been mentioned, it's a 19-year program. The county has expressed interest in seeing that program come to a close, which is what promulgated the, hey, do we want to continue to provide ALS service in Newberry? The commission said yes, so we've embarked on this program of training our own paramedics. We see that sunsetting in 5 to 8 years, budget permitting, as long as we stay the course. Just want to kind of give you an update on what ALS is, but ultimately, if the county were to withdraw that paramedic, if we didn't have a substitute, we would have to, we would see that service back down to a BLS level, and it would be a decrease in the level of service that we're offering to our residents.
All right.
If history shows anything, we can just put Matt on the truck.
Yeah, yeah.
No, my response to that is that would be a grave mistake by the county. And indicative of their lack of sensitivity to the people that live outside of Gainesville.
All right, agenda item D. C has been marked from here, so we're on to D. commission meeting schedule for July. And I'll go ahead and start off by saying that this meeting is July 8th. And I won't be here because of the way the July 4th is going. I won't be here till Tuesday on the 9th. Any other commissioners going to be gone?
I too will be gone July 8th, and I can speak for the mayor. The mayor will be gone July 8th. We
Yeah,
will
there's
both
three
be
of us.
So,
absent.
Mr. Mayor, we have two objectives with this agenda item. One, to advise the commission that we have 7 public workshops that have been discussed that we'd like to schedule between now and the end of October. 3 are related to budget workshops that are already scheduled. One is related to law enforcement alternatives that we've been discussing as late July, and the other 3 have to do with charter review, going through the changes that were made by the city's charter review committee. That is anticipated to be 3, but with an acknowledgement that if we get through it in 2, we'll cap it at 2. So we have 6 to 7 workshops to add to the commission's already busy schedule. And to your point on the other item, the first meeting in July is scheduled for July the 8th, which is the second Monday in July. However, it falls on the heels of the Independence Day holiday, and we have 3 elected officials that are unable to attend the meeting, and we've noticed kind of running low on business items at the staff level, and we're going to have some scarcity of staff the week preceding. So staff is offering for consideration to the commission that that we could probably eliminate the July 8th meeting, have that second meeting in July, and get all the business items taken care of on July the 22nd. However, as quickly as I offer that, I'll also quickly put in there that staff's not trying to get out of work, and if the commission or the community feels like that they want to have a meeting on July 8th, we will be here with bells on, ready to have that meeting.
Okay. Are you going to, are we going to discuss the, for all the other meetings, are we going to, do you have dates already in line for those?
We do not, Mr. Mayor. We have a calendar, and it's posted. That's the calendar for July, so you can see we have a budget workshop on the 15th. We currently show that we have a regular city commission meeting on the 8th and the 22nd, planning and zoning board on the 1st, and we are planning a law enforcement workshop towards the end of the month. So staff recommends that law enforcement workshop likely be on the 30th or the 31st of July, so Tuesday or a Wednesday. I guess the Monday's also open. It's the 5th Monday of the month. So.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
let's see if we can't pick off at least the July 8th meeting. If there isn't a whole lot that we can't cover in the 22nd meeting, it seems fine to go ahead and get that one at least canceled.
Okay. Do we need to make a motion for
Please,
that one?
please, sir.
Okay. Need a motion for canceling the July 8th, 2019 meeting.
So moved.
Second.
So we got Commissioner Martin made the motion and Hersom on the second. Any discussion on that? Anybody? Any from the public?
Peggy Loy, committee for the art contest for the Squawski Centennial. Close. It was indicated last meeting that it would be nice if it could all be done and ready and presented by the fall festival. We have come up with a way we can do that, but we plan to do the presentations on the 8th so that the attorneys would have time to get the waiver done, because we have to have all the material out to the artists by August 1st in order to have the exhibit up, all the submissions in and exhibits up by the end of November. So if we can't do it then, then it'll be January before we can do this.
Can we add that into one of our budget workshops? Do it prior to?
I don't know how long it will take the attorneys to review the waivers and the legal parts of it, but however that is, we need it back so that by August 1st, we can have all the publications out and the call to artists out.
And if we don't do it, the 22nd wouldn't work if the 8th
The
is unavailable.
22nd, I don't know, will we have it back by the 28th?
Yes, we'll do that, Peggy. We'll get it done.
Okay, so if we present it in that regular meeting, we'll have all the documents back by before, so we have a couple days to get it ready for August 1st.
Yes, ma'am. I don't think there's any reason not to
Okay.
go ahead and have the city staff and attorney begin review of those documents.
Wonderful.
So that if
Because
we
we've
have
done
a
all the preliminary
presentation on the
ones.
22nd, that we could finalize them by August 1st so that you don't miss that August 1st deadline.
Wonderful. That way we can have the exhibit up on display by the time the Fall Festival is, and it will be juried secretly. So there's a good reason for this, is because we want to have a reception and opening and a presentation of the entire exhibit, and at that get together to announce what prizes have been awarded. So we don't want to say ahead of time what they are, because we'd like to have as much of the community there as possible. Okay? Good.
Did we vote on,
No.
we have it?
We did
That
We
was
just made a
that's
motion.
That was discussion.
All right, any more from the public? Okay. All right, all in favor of this motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye here. 5-0. All right, and now back to the other meetings.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
you said P and Z on the 1st. That was July 1st, right?
Yes, sir.
So I have P and Z on the 1st, budget meeting for governmental funds on the 15th, commissioner meeting on the 22nd, and you want an LEO workshop on the 30th or 31st?
Or the 29th. 29th is a Monday night, it's the 5th Monday night. That might be preferable. Either of those 3 dates are fine with staff.
When you said
And we're
the
just
first-
having one versus more than one?
Just one on law enforcement is anticipated. It's a commission request another.
Okay.
We anticipate that in September that the commission will make a decision. We'll have a workshop. We'll educate the community and the commission, get their feedback, and
Mhm.
be ready to put something in front of the commission for consideration in September. Part of our budget process.
I'm fine with the 29th.
I am too.
He's okay.
Monty?
I'm fine.
Matt?
Awesome.
And I got so Miss Amy, that I don't have to put this in here, it comes to me, right? I keep getting double of stuff, it's because I sit here and type it in and then you send something, so, okay. All right,
It's a Monday.
so,
Planning zone.
July 29th, Monday?
Got a motion for that?
I think if we pick up all of the workshops, we could do those in one motion. So
Okay.
we have law enforcement on July 29th. We're looking at 3 potential dates prior to October 31st for the charter review workshop,
Just, you know,
up to 3.
I'm
and so
sorry,
we're
by-
looking in August, is that where we're looking now?
We could look in August, September. September's kind of busy just simply because of work budget. So it's fairly intensive. I missed the last meeting on charter review, but I believe that the charter review committee discussed completing their 3rd workshop by the end of October. I'd almost back up from there. Maybe pick a standing night and do it every 2 weeks for 6 weeks.
And
Say that again?
I said that
3 meetings, right?
the Charter Review Committee, I think the schedule adopted was to try to complete 3 workshops by the end of October. So our suggestion would be to maybe do October 1st, 15th, and 29th, every 2 weeks through October, the 29th being optional if we get it all covered by October 1st and 15th. Those are Tuesday evenings.
I'm good with that. They're all open on mine.
That's after budget, after.
That's after
Yeah.
budget's adopted. We'll be a whole 1 day into the budget season at that point.
Discussion?
15th is the only day I have conflict. I'll be at Sunbelt Ag Expo that week.
Carrying me? Oh, my God.
Well, and we're just floating ideas if you want to try to pick another date for that particular one.
I say we go with 1st, 15th, and 29th, and then when we get to the second meeting, maybe we'll make a motion or whatever that week
Okay.
and move it. But it seems like, you know what I'm saying?
Okay.
And,
And would the commission like to start those workshops at 6 p.m., 6:30, or 7 p.m.?
6, I mean, 6 is fine with me, too.
Does that work for everybody? We'll book them all at 6. Okay, in terms of a motion, law enforcement.
Are we gonna have trick or treating on the 29th?
We no longer are
Mr.
involved with Halloween.
Mr. Mayor, on the 28th, we'll have an agenda item to determine what, no, I'm kidding. No, sir, don't anticipate trick or treating. So the motion would be law enforcement workshop on July 29th, that's a Monday, and charter review workshops on October 1st, 15th, and 29th, all beginning at 6 p.m.
Anybody want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion. July 29th, have the law enforcement workshop at 6. October 1, 15, and 29 at 6 p.m. for charter review workshops.
Second.
So we got a motion by Commissioner Martin and a second by Commissioner Farnsworth. Any more discussion? Any public discussion? Okay, all in favor with the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
That's an aye for me too. 5-0. All right, now we're coming to comments. So let's start it off with City Manager New.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess I'll start with the not-so-great news. Last week, we received the property appraiser's certified taxable values, and we were down a smidge. So instead of seeing a healthy increase of some percentage, we're actually just below, we're in the negative on property values, and as a result, our rollback rate, if you elect for us to be there, will be in the 6 mil range.
Can I make a comment on that?
Yes, sir, absolutely.
Well, and that right there shows you that the more houses you bring in to the city of Newberry does not mean that it's going to increase. Until we get more commercial property, because there's the depreciation, the cap 10 kills it when it comes to residential, which, you know, it's good for the homeowner. But when we need more commercial business here.
Absolutely, and you're still on my thunder, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That was no, that's completely appropriate. It just almost all of the reduction in values is associated with depreciation at Argos, and it shows the significance of this commission's objectives for a very big focus on non-residential economic development, and it fueled staff's fire to continue to push that. We have been on a monumental push for about 2 years yet, and we have lots of I guess, lines in the water, and we're going to continue that, and we land some of these projects so that we are not so dependent on one source. Also speaks to the Commission's direction to staff, been ongoing for 5 years now, to diversify our revenue streams as much as possible. So just thought I'd report that, let you know that tomorrow night at 7 p.m. in the municipal building, we're having a neighborhood meeting related to drainage concerns at Countryway. It's not an elected official. We're going to vote on anything. This is just an opportunity for us to meet with residents of Countryway, kind of explain what our findings are and what our recommendations to the City Commission will be in the future when we make those recommendations. Of course, our elected officials are welcome to attend, but there's not going to be a forum necessarily for discussion, at least among elected officials. Also, as advise you that Alachua County will be discussing, the Board of County Commissioners have the Newberry CRA on their agenda tomorrow, so we'll be watching that. As already mentioned, next week is a holiday week, so we wish everyone a happy holidays, safe travels. We're seeing some thinning of staff because people were taking summer vacations. I just wanted to make sure that everyone's aware that we have adequate coverage, so our utility outage, all those types of things will be properly covered. We're even making sure that we have fire protection for the whole holiday week. Not gonna take a day off at the fire department or anything. I'm just kidding. We had a meeting with our mining operations last week. We met with 4 different operators of mines out in the area north of Canterbury and Newberry Oaks. Very positive meeting. It's like everything I find that when you dig into other people's businesses, how complex they are. It's a highly regulated industry. Found out that the blasting is really something that doesn't happen that much, and it's very much market driven. We'll be preparing a report to bring to the commission and a presentation to bring to the commission to kind of advise you what's going on with all that so that you're better prepared to answer questions as they arise from time to time. And that concludes my comments, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. City Attorney?
None, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem.
Okay, thank you. City Clerk? Okay. All right, so let's start it differently. Anything from Commissioner Norfleet? Martin?
No, sir.
Commissioner Farnsworth?
I just want to thank our utility department for being there last week when we were having all those bad storms and all, and they always do an amazing job, and just want to give our appreciation to them.
We'll pass that along to staff.
Commissioner Herson?
The only thing I would say, and again, it's current events in my life, is if anybody's out there that if you have the opportunity to get CPR training, go ahead and take it, because oftentimes you might be the only person or the only opportunity to do something in a situation. While AEDs are becoming more prevalent in public places, they aren't always available. And so if you've got the opportunity to take CPR training, please go ahead and take it, because it can make a difference in somebody's life.
Okay, all right. And I guess my comments. She didn't want to be mentioned, but the ambulance. Do y'all know our number? Is everybody? 28. I'm trying to think which baseball player that was. Oh, well. All I know is she could not believe how nice, I think her words were how tender they were towards her and accommodating. And you don't know how, when I first got on here, Mayor Marlowe, well, at that time he was Commissioner Marlowe, he goes, man, we just got to have an ambulance. And I looked at him, and I was a brand new rookie, and I said, I don't care what it takes. That's one of the things. I got your back. Let's get it here, whatever it's going to take. Let's get this ambulance here. We got to have it. And then now hearing that, I mean, she's got to be in her 80s, but just to hear that, just not that they saved her life and all that, it's just that everything that she wanted to bring some clothes, and our chief might know who this is and all, but they went in there and got our clothes for her. I mean, I honestly, I don't know that that's done in Jacksonville, Florida. I don't know that that's done in Atlanta, but I can tell you right now, by God, it's done right here in Newberry. And that all goes back to our chief. I mean, I'm sure that you know that he expects top notch. And I personally appreciate you being on the job there, man. And besides that, I appreciate y'all putting up with me tonight. This is my first time, and I hope I did okay. If I didn't, I'm sure I'm going to hear it from especially Marlo. So, all right. So let's go to citizens' comments.
Me again. Peggy Loy, Firehouse Gallery, something new. We have a new show we've hung yesterday and today, and the reception will be this Friday from 6 until 8. It'll be sure be nice that some of y'all came, and anybody else in town. It's a pretty nice show. Oops. Peggy Loy, Farmers Market. Remember the Farmers Market? Tuesdays, 4 to 7.
And the steaks go quick.
And
right?
what?
I remember last meeting, Mayor Marlowe said the steaks, if you're going to get them, get in there and get them quick because they're great and they're gone real quick.
They do go very quickly. In fact,
what's
last
his
week,
name?
Graham.
Graham.
In fact, last week I tried to buy some little fillets because it's a nice size for me, and I did it early, and he had sold all of those out. The barbecue man is there, and he's very popular. He didn't sell out this week, but he brought a whole bunch more. And of course, we have a few other vendors. We have some new ones who are doing nifty guacamole. The lady makes it right there.
Wow.
And the smoothies. What was this? Pineapple smoothies. And she served them in the pineapple. It looks like you're in some tiki bar with a little umbrella and everything on it. It was pretty good.
More comments?
All right. Jim Stainfield, citizen. This past couple weeks, y'all have heard a lot about me from emails. I've been emailing y'all about Newberry Main Street. In our last meeting, we gave $10,000 to Newberry Main Street for, I was told, work done, work provided. At the time, during the meeting, it was said that the volunteers do an exceptional job and they deserve this. And I personally thought that was demeaning to all the other volunteers and all the other various organizations in town. They all do good work. I mean, I've not seen one organization in town that doesn't have volunteers where they're doing great work. I think our Newberry Main Street organization is a very good organization. I think they've done great work here in the city of Newberry. The problem I have with the organization is the fact that it is trying to follow state guidelines. I personally would like to see the organization become independent of the state and become a separate organization that would help enhance all economic opportunity and building interests in the city of Newberry. I want to speak now to just basically the citizens of Newberry that are possibly watching on TV. If you go to the state of Florida Main Street Guide to Becoming a Main Street, I would suggest you go there and read this document. 7-page document that outlines what the Main Street organization should be doing. I'm pretty sure the citizens of Newberry do not want this for our town. So I strongly suggest you go look at this document, make it known to your commissioners what you think. That's all I got. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Any more public comment? All right. Any staff or anything? All right. Well, I'm going to call this meeting adjourned.